Jeez, if I was ever going to make a video about the world's biggest badasses, Lemmy Kilmister is going to be near the top of that list. And today we're here to talk about the life and the legacy of one of music's greatest icons. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and we can't start a video talking about Lemmy of all people without having a toast in his honour. And well, fellow viewer, I implore you to do the same thing. Drink responsibly, kids. Yes, to you, Lemmy. Oh yes, what a goddamn legend we're going to be talking about today. But now that we're all oiled up, we are today going through the life and the history of Lemmy Kilmister. He is well known, of course, for being the frontman of the heavy metal band Motorhead. But there is so much more to this man than meets the eye, which all starts back in 1945, where Lemmy, actually named Ian, was born in Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire in England, later to live in Newcastle and Madley. As a matter of fact, it was apparently in school where Lemmy got the famous name Lemmy, down to the fact that he would normally ask people to borrow a fiver in order to play slot machines, which seems pretty on character. Otherwise known as a fruity for all of you non-natives out there. Lemmy himself apparently didn't even know the origin behind his name, but he kept it anyway, it seemed to stick. When he was younger, he would start learning guitar and played for local bands like the Sundowners. Growing up, he would even see the Beatles at the legendary Cavern Club in Liverpool when he was about 16 years old, to which he learned to play along to the album Please Please Me. Cavern Club is a fantastic venue. I've been there before, mainly to have a look at the memorabilia and to get myself a pint, but you know, if you're ever down Liverpool way, I'd say go pay a visit. In the mid-60s, Lemmy would join some local bands and play northern clubs for a few years, including the Rainmakers and the Rockin' Vickers, before leaving and sharing a flat in London with the then bassist of the Jimi Hendrix Experience for the Jimi Hendrix. As far as famous friends are concerned, that's pretty much up there. With hindsight, I suppose. During this time, Lemmy would be in a couple of other bands which would eventually fall away, but one of the main things he did at this point in his life was being a roadie for Jimi Hendrix, and he got to see him play live, and they did so much speed together. Honestly, if you wanted experience in the music scene, being a roadie for Jimi Hendrix was probably top of that list, and if you wanted to be there for pretty much the start of rock and roll, Lemmy was front and centre for it. I imagine that was a musical experience he will never forget. That or the insane amount of acid he took whilst on tour. Lemmy has said before that pretty much everyone in the crew would be on acid, and by the second day you wouldn't feel its effects. So instead they took double the amount, and by the end of the tour they were doing it by the handful like dolly mixtures. Well, each to their own, I guess. One of the more notable bands that Lemmy was a part of was when he joined the band Hawkwind as a bassist and vocalist in August 1971. You might not think that this was so much of a fit for Lemmy given the fact that he would eventually go on to be part of a band like Motorhead. However, these things take time, and you've got to certainly go through the paces to get to where you're destined to be. Well, these differences would eventually come through, as he eventually did leave the band due to the excessive drug habits he was taking. Ah, that sounds a bit more like Lemmy, but when I say he left the band, what I meant to say was he was kicked out of the band. And it wasn't because of the fact that he was doing drugs, no, because everyone was doing drugs. Everyone was just doing acid and they did what they did at the time. However, the reason he was kicked out, allegedly, was because he was doing the wrong type of drugs. Whilst on tour with Hawkwind driving from Michigan to Detroit, Lemmy went on a wander for some time, and by the time he came back, the rest of the band had pissed off. They had left him by the side of the road, and well, he was all by himself. This would be the first inklings of the band we all know and love, Motorhead. Well, we're almost there, but not quite, because the band they originally formed was called Bastards. However, their manager at the time didn't think that their band would get to the top of the pops due to being called Bastards, so reluctantly they decided to change the name to Motorhead. That being the title of the last song that Lemmy wrote with Hawkwind before he was kicked out. However, the theme for this new band would be very different to that of Hawkwind, with the music being fairly basic but aggressive, the baseline for what Motorhead would ultimately become. Motorhead, the dirtiest band in the world. And it was this chapter in Lemmy's life with Motorhead where he really propelled himself, and Motorhead became one of the heaviest, hardest and loudest bands ever to grace this earth. In the early 80s there would be the release of the now infamous song The Ace of Spades, the defining song of their legacy, and many would say propelled them to the top of the charts. Aside from the excessive drugs he takes, Lemmy drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels every day. Yes, he drank an entire bottle every day. An entire one of these, that's insane. I think I'd keel over and die. Either that or I'd be out of the game for an entire week, and by that point, Lemmy will have drank another 6 bottles by the time that I get back on the wagon. As you may have guessed by now, Lemmy lived by his own rules, and he did what Lemmy wanted to do. This made Motorhead a true standout in the scene in the 80s, and really propelling that rock and roll lifestyle forward, they were one of the key defining bands of the genre. Despite Motorhead reaching their heights in the early 80s, they never strayed from the path. They did what they loved and stayed true to their lifestyle to the very end. I mean, he's claimed to have slept with over 2,000 women in his time, and to be honest, I don't see that being that far off given the touring life that Lemmy lived. Throughout the years, Motorhead would go on to release 22 studio albums, 10 live recording albums, and selling over 15 million albums worldwide. Acclaimed as one of rock's greatest, they kept their legacy going for 40 years. Motorhead are truly acclaimed as one of rock's greats. During that time, there were a few hiccups along the way, including a tour that was cancelled due to Lemmy having flu, exhaustion, and lung infection, to being hospitalised 5 years later due to dehydration and exhaustion. In the later years of his life, he would start to have more health issues, requiring him to start using a walking stick at times, and be much more aware of the damage the constant alcohol, cigarette and drug use was having on him. Yes, it was pretty insane, and just to put it into context, for the longest time he was having 2 packs a day, and he managed to reduce it down after doctor's orders to a pack a week. And for someone that's been smoking that many cigarettes for that long, that's a big come down. According to Lemmy's own admission, he'd been smoking cigarettes since he was 11 years old, meaning that he'd had, well, been smoking for 70 years straight. How did this guy last as long as he did? Despite all of the health issues, he kept rocking all the way to his last days, all while remaining loud, fast and heavy as a motherfucker. On the 28th of December 2015, 4 days after his 70th birthday, Lemmy died at his Los Angeles apartment from prostate cancer, cardiac arrhythmia and congestive heart failure. Although he had been given 6 months to live beforehand, Lemmy wanted to make a public announcement, but he unfortunately died before a press release could be made. I remember exactly where I was when I first heard these news. I remember being in a rock club, and at the time, whatever we were listening to, the DJ stopped the music and made an announcement to everybody saying that Lemmy had died. And that really sucked. But then they played an hour's worth of Motorhead, and I think that is what Lemmy would have wanted. His life was one that I would think a lot of people would aspire to have, not because of the fact that he abused every drug under the sun, but he well and truly lived by his own rules and did what he wanted to do by his own rules until the very end. Even if you don't like his music, you have to admire his outlook on life, as well as being, Lemmy. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. I mean, yeah, we can't really end the video any other way than in the Lemmy spirit, so I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Fan-fucking-tastic.